what kind of fruit have I been producing in this season? It's a life verse for me because I always go back to it and I say, what kind of life is your faith producing? So I want to ask you the question that I ask myself: what kind of life is your faith producing? When you look back on this season of life, when you look back on this year, especially this year, what kind of life has your faith been producing? Have you been changing people's lives through your life? If you were to look back on your life so far, especially in this season, in this season, has your faith changed your life? Or are you still the person who marked on that connection card, "I'm going to commit my life to Jesus," and nothing's changed? Are you still that person who ran up to that altar call and you're like, "Man, I want to give my life to Jesus," and nothing's changed? I'm not asking things to change instantaneously. I'm not asking that things change overnight. But man, over the course of small incremental changes every single day, is your life changing for the better? Are you producing good fruit? What is the fruit that your life is producing? Do people know that you are a Christian by your actions and not just your profile on Facebook? Is your family thriving and growing because of you? Man, are there people sleeping in Hurt Park tonight a little bit warmer with a blanket because you provided that? Will there be people in heaven because of you? Do your children know Jesus because of you? I remember when I was growing up, when I used to hear the message from the pastor say, "You got to invite people to church," I'd be so wary to invite people to church. I used to be so wary to invite my friends because, man, I wasn't living any different than my friends. And it was hard to save the world when you act like the world. The world must see a difference first in your life before they know that they need it for their own life. Jesus must be real to you first before you want him to be real in other people's lives. And if you say, "Chesin, you're right, and my life isn't any different. I'm producing bad fruit," this is not a message of condemnation. That is absolutely okay. There is hope in Jesus, and when we surrender our life to God, before this year ends, before we reset, "God, I want to produce good fruit in my life. I want to do the things that are necessary to be on the straight and narrow and produce good fruit in my life." God is more than able to honor that, and we are safe in the hands of our loving God. He is more than able to change our life. So first, our faith should change us, and as our faith is changing us, our faith should impact the lives of others. Love this verse in Ephesians, impact the lives of others. It says in Ephesians 2 and verse 8, says this: "God saved you by his grace when you believed, and you can't take credit for this. It is a gift from God. Salvation is not a reward for the good things we have done, so none of us can boast about it." There's two perspectives on reading this verse, and you'll experience both perspectives in your life. There will be times in your life when you're really hard on yourself. Maybe you're going through a dark season in your life. Maybe you've committed sin, or you have repetitive sin in your life, and you're like, "Man, God, I feel so far from you. I feel so distant from you." I want to remind you that if you could lose your salvation, if you and I could lose our salvation, we absolutely would have already. But our salvation is secure in God because it is a free gift from God. And if your darkest season, then I want you to realize you can't take credit for this. It's a gift from God. Salvation is not a reward for the good things we have done, so none of us can boast about it. In your darkest season, I want you to know that. In the best seasons of your life, I also want you to know this verse. When you feel like, man, you're on cloud nine, you're doing so many great things for God, you're doing so many good works, you're serving in church, you're running your ministry, everything is going great in your life, I want you to remember this verse because sometimes we can become prideful. Salvation is not based on any good thing that you and I have done, but it's a free gift from God, so none of us can boast about it. So that is a perspective that we need to have when things are going well, and also when things are not going so well. Verse 10, "For we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do the good things he planned for us long ago." Ephesians 2 and verse 10 is one of my absolute favorite verses to speak over us as a church. I love Ephesians 2 and 10. Anytime that I get to share Ephesians 2 and 10 with you, I love to do it because Ephesians 2 and 10 says that you are God's masterpiece. It does not matter how broken you are, how chipped you are, how distraught you feel, how many millions of pieces you are in. You are God's masterpiece. I love you. When I first started here, one of the things I did, one of my first jobs here was to be the first impressions person. So we had this little ID tag that said "Ask Me," and on that ID tag, I put in there in a little font. I put on Ephesians 2:10 because I want you to know that you are God's masterpiece. That when God sees you, He sees His